Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to Discover Series Hangouts on Air. My name is Tadej Udovic, and I'm a product specialist for audiences. I'm really happy that you're all dialing in from different continents today into the Discovery Series. For those of you that this is new or you're here for the first time, just to give you a bit of a context, what we're doing here. So we have a series of session called Digital Transformation, where we talk about how to transform your business in a context of different topics such as audiences, mobile, YouTube, and as mentioned today, we're going to be specifically focusing on audiences. Just a quick FYI. For those of you that want to ask a question, please feel free to do that at any time during this presentation. You have a comment box down below, or you can, if you're on YouTube, you can see a comment box on the right-hand side. And also, if you're on a community page, for a better viewing experience, what I suggest you do is just click on the video and you're going to be transferred directly to the YouTube page. And again, you have the comment box then on the right-hand side for any questions. I would really encourage you, if you have any type of questions, just, related to audiences, obviously, just feel free to put them down. And then at the end of this session, I'm going to take roughly 5 to 10 minutes and, just kind of run through like the major topics and try to answer to your questions. What else? If you want to share this with your colleagues, with your friends, with your coworkers, with, whoever you want, feel free to do so. I'd be really happy, in fact, if you share this with anyone else. All right, so let's get started. For those of you that were not present in the previous sessions with Ellie and Subir, where they talked about digital transformation in a context of mobile and YouTube, what we're really aiming to do during this session is basically to talk about two different types of marketing professionals. So we have the performance thinkers and we have the brand thinkers, and probably most of you in this room are very heavily performance oriented. And what I mean by performance oriented, what we mean here is actually that you're experts in last click. Right, so you're really focused on proving the value of like every single campaign in terms of like CPA, conversion rates, transactions, and so on. On the contrary, so we have brand thinkers, which traditionally are considered more of a offline brand builders. Obviously, this has been changing in the last couple of years a lot. But traditionally we consider brand thinkers to be heavily brand oriented. Now, what we're trying to do with this digital transformation workshop is really to move away from this traditional thinking of performance and brand thinkers. And what we're trying to do on the performance side is really to move from the last click expert to what we call full value expert, right? And what I mean by that is that, performance thinkers should be able to prove the value of campaigns across the entire consumer journey, right? Not just, the last click performance oriented campaigns. On the other side, we have the brand thinkers, right? That, we feel they should be moving from solely offline brand builders to online brand builders that are able to tell a compelling story, both cross-channel and cross-screen. And what's even more important is to move beyond just simple demographic targeting into a more sophisticated targeting mechanisms. And I think we really see those, two parts of the world coming together, and successful organizations will be merging those two parts of the world into one. And to give a bit of a more context, what do we mean with performance versus brand thinkers? So if you think about the typical consumer decision-making funnel, performance thinkers are really those that are heavily oriented in a lower funnel campaigns. And what they mostly care about is CPA, conversion rates, and especially, last click metrics. Whereas those that are brand thinkers are really focused on driving reach, and their main focus is on creating one message that is kind of like one size fits all. And what we're really trying to address is this gap in between, right? So how do we bring brand thinkers into having more focused messaging, more focused targeting? And on the other hand, how can we make sure that those of you that are performance thinkers are also moving up the funnel and going beyond the last click? All right. So 4 topics that we're going to tackle today. 3 topics that we're going to tackle today. Number 1 is why audiences. So we're going to talk about why are audiences important today in the context of digital transformation. Number 2, we're going to talk about who your audiences are. And in this section, actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through some of the super useful tools that can help you analyze who your audiences are beyond demographic targeting. Number 3, we're going to talk about audience targeting. I'm going to take you through some of the targeting mechanisms that you can use. Probably a lot of you are familiar with it, but we're just going to do a quick refresher. And then the next session, we're going to touch the KPIs and measurement. I'm going to touch them slightly today, but I'll leave that for the upcoming sessions. All right, before we go into the show, one really important thing, one question actually that I wanted to give out to all of you guys is, and I want you to use the comment box down below or on the right-hand side if you're on YouTube. And the question is, if you were about to describe your typical customer, so think about your typical customer, right? What would be the attributes that you would be using to describe that typical customer? So how would you describe your typical customer? So use the comment box down below or on the right-hand side if you're on YouTube. And when you type a comment, add a hashtag typical customer. This is just for me to be able to then go through all of your answers. So once again, what I'm interested in is if you had to describe your typical customer, what are the characteristics that you would use to describe that typical customer? All right. If you're in an agency, if you work for an agency, just think about pick one of your clients and describe for that specific client. All right. So, and what I'm going to do is then in a few minutes, I'm going to go through your answers and kind of try to summarize what was the most common answer. All right. So let's start with why audiences. So the reason why audiences are important is actually very simple, right? Because the fact is that, customers don't go online anymore, right? But they pretty much live online, right? So if you think about yourself, the amount of time that you spend on like smartphones and tablets and desktops is just, incredible. But the painful truth that we as marketeers are facing is that most of the times when the folks are online, they don't really care about your brand or product or service, but they do their own stuff, right? So they go to different apps, they watch a video, they're sending emails, they're chatting with their friends, they're downloading new apps. So they do a whole bunch of different actions that are not necessarily showing us any interest or intent for a product. So for us as marketeers, it's always a challenge to kind of become relevant in those small moments when people don't necessarily yet care about you, right? So what we're going to try to answer is how to figure out and address those audiences when they're not necessarily yet thinking about us. Number 2, why audiences are important is, and you've probably seen this somewhere else, is the fact that people interact with their mobile devices more than 150 times per day. And just to make this fact a bit more interesting is that this research was actually made back in 2013, right? So that's 3 years ago, and probably this number has grown in some way or another. As a marketeers, again, we have to figure out how do we become relevant in those moments when people are using their mobile device. And just to give you a very practical example, this was what I did is I took one of my days, and I tried to observe what were the things that I was doing on my smartphone, right? So I was doing different things, right? I was, checking for the weather forecast. I listened to music. I was checking my email. I used a flashlight to find some things in my apartment. So I did a bunch of different things. And then at some point, I also bought one thing. So I recently bought a quadcopter, which is one of my hobbies as well. So I bought a quadcopter, and as you can see, right, most of those moments in my day, right, were not related to buying anything, right, but they were simply just discovering or listening to music or sending an email and so on and so forth, right. So again, just to amplify this message, most of the moments that people spend on their mobile phones, desktops, tablets, and so on, they're not related to buying a product. And the third reason why audiences are important is because brand queries are important, right? And what we've actually realized is that in 48% of the purchases, people tend to switch between brand and generic queries, right? So for example, if they say they're looking for a laptop, right, they would be switching between what's the best laptop, or buy let's say Dell computer or by Apple computer or whatever. So they would be switching between different, generic and brand terms. And, to really drive the volume of brand queries, it's not enough to simply focus on the keyword campaigns, on brand keyword campaigns, but you basically have to focus on mid and upper funnel to drive the volume of brand queries. So the challenge that we're actually facing is, number one, how do we capture customers that are not yet thinking about us, but are doing other things? And the second challenge is, how do we grow high-performing brand queries that are going to drive our conversions? All right, so let's go now to the second topic, where we're going to talk about who your audiences are, and what are some of the reports that you can use to understand what their interests and what their intents are. Okay, so let's get started. So the most important thing that you need to understand when it comes to figuring out who your audiences are, if you imagine this box on the slide to be all of your website visitors, right? So the way you can understand who your website visitors are is twofold, right? Or, we have two ways of understanding who your visitors are. So number one is you can use your own data, right? So you can use your own CRM data, or you can use even your, third-party data, and so on and so forth. Or on the contrary, you can use Google data or Google Insights about who your audiences are, right? So these are Google, proprietary signals where we basically, observe the behavior of every single user and then determine what their interests and what their intents are, basically, right? And this is something we can do for your website visitors. And using your data and Google's data basically helps you to understand, first of all, who your audience is, and second of all, how do we target them? Like, what is the best targeting mechanism to use for your audiences? And to go a bit more into details into different data sources, let's start with Google data first. So what Google data enables you is to understand two things: the interest and the intent of your website visitors. And how do we do that? Again, if you imagine that this box represents basically every single user that came to your website, right? Basically what we do is Google algorithm is able to do a couple of things. One, we're able to observe the repeated patterns of behavior. So what we mean by that is that we basically observe what are the things and the website that the user is browsing over time, right? What are the types of the web pages they went to? Are they showing more interest for a product, or they're showing more intent for a product? So we're able to differentiate those two things. One important thing is that we also look into personalized algorithms, right? So that means that we take every single individual separately, right? We don't, kind of generalize, right? But we personalize our algorithm for every single for every single signed-in user. And then the last thing is we do this real time, right? So what this is good for is because if someone changes their intent or interest, we're able to put them into a different category. So those are basically the signals that help us understand who your website visitors are, right? What their interests and what their intents are. And this then helps us, in a way, say what the interests and what the intents are. And when we have those interests and intent signals, we basically formulate two types of categories, right? So we have the affinity category and we have the in-market category. Most of you are probably familiar with those categories, but just to recap, affinity categories are basically tell us, again, what the interest of a user is, but it's in a way, these are aggregated users who have demonstrated a qualified and recent interest in a given topic. Whereas in-market audiences, they pretty much tell us what do they want to buy, what are they interested to buy. And the way really those categories, the way we differentiate those categories is when it comes to affinity audiences, we simply look at the type of the websites people go to, right? And again, let's go to an example of the laptop. Let's say that you're a user and you're going to different web pages that talk about laptops in general, right? So what are the different brands and so on and so forth. Let's say you go to different blogs that talk about how to buy a laptop and so in this case, we would not yet put you in the in-market audiences because you haven't really shown the clear intent to buy the product, right? However, if you then go to a web page that is a, let's say, comparison engine, and it enables you to compare different products based on price and performance, we would then put you into the in-market audience segment. All right, and now the question is, how do we figure out what category our website visitors belong to, right? So how do we know what affinity category they're in or what in-market category they're in? So what I'm going to take you through is now a couple of reports that you can use to figure that out. So the first report that I highly encourage you to use it, for those of you that are not familiar, is called the Audience Insights Report in AdWords Interface. And what Audience Insight Report really does is it helps you analyze your remarketing list and then explains to you what are the most popular or the top affinity and in-market audiences that your segment belongs to. In addition to that, you can also see, what's the most popular device, what's the location they're coming from, what's the gender, what's the age, and you pretty much get quite a comprehensive understanding of who your website visitors are. Just as an FYI, the Audience Insight Report not only analyzes the people that clicked on your ad, but it analyzes the entire remarketing list. So that includes then also organic traffic and other traffic sources. So this is a really good start to get a very basic picture of your website visitors. So how do you access this report? For those of you that are not familiar, you simply go to the shared library in AdWords account, you click on audiences, and then you select one of the remarketing lists available in your shared library. And then this will bring you to the Audience Insights report. Okay, so how can we do this in Google Analytics? In Google Analytics, you also have an Audience Insight report that tells you pretty much the same. And the way to access that is you simply go to Google Analytics, you go to Reports, Audience section, and then within Audiences, you have a section called Interests. And this is where you can, again, find the affinity and in-market segments. So I highly encourage every one of you to really, check out those segments. What I would also encourage you to do is filter down by not just all users, but perhaps narrow down the segment to those that have converted in the past, or maybe those that have dropped out from the shopping cart, or maybe those people that left a contact on your web page, and so on and so forth. So really try to narrow down the segment to focus on the most relevant users. And the way to do that is actually you have a segment section at the very top. You just hit the add segment, and then this should help you then add an additional layer, an additional segment. Okay, so what are the other reports that can help you understand who your audiences are? I think one very basic report is obviously the demographic report in Google Analytics. So I guess most of you are familiar with this report. Demographic targeting is not perhaps the best approach to go about segmenting your users, because it's kind of too generic, it's too broad, but it's definitely a good start. And one thing I would really encourage you to do in the demographic report is don't look just at the at the split of different demographic groups. So in terms of, don't just look into a lot of advertisers come to me and they say, yeah, the demographic group of between 18 and 24 brought 60% of the transaction. That's fine, but it doesn't help us a whole lot to decide what our marketing efforts should be like. So what I really encourage you to do is figure out or understand how this segment performed over time. So try to understand if this segment was growing year on year, or was it declining? Is there a specific group, for example, that increased in last couple of years, and we should put more focus on it? So really try to see how the different demographic groups were changing over time. So this is a demo report, and since we're just at this report, let me just check what your answers were to my question. All right, so most of you said that the way you segmented, so the attributes that you were using to segment your audiences were, let's see, so jobs and age, instant service delivery, high disposal income, time killer and time consuming, job type, value, car owners with three. Okay, cool. All right. Marketing students and professional. Interesting. Okay. Interesting. Okay. All right, so thanks for sharing your answers. So a lot of you were quite detailed in terms of what attributes you would be using to segment your customers. Again, one thing that I would really encourage you is to stay away from a demographic segmentation, because it's too broad and it doesn't really tell you a whole lot about your customers, and it doesn't really help you tailor your targeting and the messaging. So really try to go deeper than just demographic segmentation. All right, so let's go to using your data. So what can you do to use your data and understand who your customers are? So again, in this case, I would highly encourage you to use Audience Insight Report. And one thing you can do is, most of you are familiar with Customer Match probably, right? So Customer Match, for those of you that don't know, enables you to target users based on their email addresses when they're signed in across our YouTube and search YouTube, Gmail and search property. But in addition to helping you target those people, you can also understand who are they in terms of end market and affinity categories. So I highly encourage you that you import your emails from your CRM to AdWords, and then again use Audience Insights to understand who they are, basically. So this report is currently still in a beta stage. So if you want to get the insights, please reach out to your account managers, and they will help you with this report. All right. So what are the other things that we can understand about our segments? Number one is behavior report. So behavior report pretty much tells you whether most of your customers, most of your clients coming to your website are new or they're returning visitors, right? And again, what I would really encourage you to do here is not just look into the split of new versus returning visitors, but really look into how they are, growing or declining over time. So, for example, if you see that, new visitors are declining over time, that's a clear signal that, you perhaps have to focus more on mid and upper funnel campaign to really increase the new user base. On the contrary, if you have a lot of returning, if your returning visitors are declining over time, maybe that's a signal that you should start with a remarketing campaign to really, re-engage those returning visitors. So essentially, what you want to come up with then at the end of this exercise of checking different reports is with some sort of a description of your typical customer or your typical segment. And this is a simple layout that you can use, and I highly encourage you that you come up with 2 or 3 different segments like this, where you basically describe the gender, the age, their passions or their affinities, what is their intent to buy or in-market audiences, what is their behavior? So are they more new or more returning users? What is the device that they're using? And perhaps some other signals that you can get from other sources. So really try to come up with 2 or 3 slides like this where you describe your typical segment. And I think this should really help you focus your marketing efforts and kind of have the aligned understanding of your target segment across the entire organization. Okay, so let's go into the last topic, which is targeting. So in this section, we're going to talk about what are the different targeting mechanisms that you can use to essentially target your audiences. Now, we talked a lot about, we touched affinity and in-market audiences, so I'm not going to go into details with those 2, but I'll address a few other targeting mechanisms that you're perhaps not yet familiar with that much. So the easiest way to describe what different targeting mechanisms are in AdWords interface is by using a typical consumer decision-making funnel, which is see, think, do, and care, or awareness, consideration, drive action, and grow loyalty. Now, the reason why I'm using this funnel is because we've seen way too often that someone is using, let's say, affinity targeting, and they expect to drive transactions, or someone is using, for example, let's say, RLSA, and they expect this will drive brand awareness. So it's really important to understand where different targeting mechanisms fit in terms of the customer journey or funnel. So if we start with drive action and grow loyalty, so really the lower funnel, we have a couple of audience mechanisms. So one is the static remarketing, dynamic remarketing, remarketing list for search ads, and customer match. So static remarketing pretty much means, for those people that have been on our website and, they leave our website, they go to a different page, we show them a static image and try to get them back. Dynamic remarketing pretty much means that we're showing them a tailored product or service, depending on the things that they've seen on our website, right? So if they checked a specific product, we want to make sure that we're actually showing them that specific product. Remarketing list for search ads, you probably know they enable us to modify bits for returning visitors on our search campaigns. And then there's the customer match, which I talked about earlier in this presentation. All right, so this is for drive action and grow loyalty. For influencing consideration, we have a couple of mechanisms that we talked about already. We have in-market audiences, we have similar audiences both on search and display, and we have customer match again. And on the building awareness side, again, we have affinity, we have demographics, and we have custom affinity audiences. So the important thing to really ask yourself whenever you're setting up a campaign or building up a marketing strategy, really think about what is your objective, right? If your objective is building awareness, then make sure that you select the targeting mechanisms that will drive you awareness. If you're more focused on driving actions, then make sure that you're selecting those mechanisms that help you drive action. One thing worth mentioning as well is that and this is something that we're gonna be talking about in the next section, in the next Hangout on Air. Also make sure that for every stage of the customer decision-making funnel, you're using a different way of measuring and attributing value to those campaigns. When you have an awareness campaign, measuring last click conversions is not the right way to do it. But again, this is something that we're going to be talking about in the next section. Okay, so when it comes to targeting mechanisms, we've talked about affinity and in-market segments. I'm not going to go through remarketing as well, because you guys are probably familiar with remarketing a lot. But we're only going to touch similar audiences and custom affinity audiences, which I feel personally that a lot of advertisers are not yet fully utilizing. So when it comes to similar audiences, it's very simple. So the way they basically work is we take your remarketing list, we try to understand how does that remarketing user look like? What is their browsing behavior? What is the type of the pages that they're going through? And then what we do is we take those signals and create similar lists. So we essentially create a list of users that are similar to your remarketing list. We can actually do different types of similar audiences lists. We can either have users that are similar to your existing customer base, which is known as customer match. We can either have a list of users that are similar to your mobile app customers, or we can have similar audiences lists of users that are similar to your simply to your website visitors. An important thing to know is that similar audiences are available across display and video, and also on search as a beta. So if you're interested, get in touch with your account manager about that. The next audience targeting mechanism, which I think it's highly underutilized, is custom affinity audiences. And what custom affinity audiences actually help you to do is to set up your own affinity segment. And the way this works in two steps. Number one is you have to add your audience interests. And number two, you have to include web pages with content that your users care about. So when you add those two things, we help you essentially create the custom affinity audiences in AdWords. And then you can apply this across GDN and YouTube. So I see this as being a highly underutilized mechanism again. So I really encourage you guys to explore this option for targeting your audiences. All right, so we've come to the end of this session. What I'm going to do now is spend the next couple of minutes going through your questions and really trying to answer to a few of them. So let's see what we have. Good point. All right. So the question from one of you was, should we pay more attention to similar audiences or existing customer? All right. This is a really good question. And there's no, I can't say that, I think the right answer here is you should pay attention to both, right? Because, similar audiences are really more for driving consideration and driving awareness, whereas focusing on existing customer base is really about focusing on driving loyalty and driving action. So I think it all boils down to whether your marketing objective is driving awareness, consideration, or driving action. So if it's driving consideration, focus on similar audiences. If it's driving action, focus on things like remarketing. Can you provide an example for your graph on See, Think, Do, Care? Oh, perfect. Yes. I let me give you an example for Sitting Do Care. All right, let's go back to the laptop example, right? So imagine you're a person and you want to buy a laptop at some point, let's say in next half a year, right? So when you're in a C stage, right, you're basically not thinking about laptop yet, right? You have it nowhere near on your mind, right? You just know that perhaps your current laptop is quite old and that you might have to replace it at some point of time in your life, right? When you're in a think stage, you know that it's about a time that you do something about it, right? And that you have to start comparing different laptops, comparing prices, comparing specs, and so on and so forth. When you're in a do stage, it basically means, okay, now I have to buy a product. So you're likely going to be researching by brand names, some generic keywords, and so on and so forth. When you're in a care stage, it pretty much means you bought that product already. You're hopefully happy with it, and then you might want to buy some accessories, like a laptop stand or a mouse pad, or well, you don't need a mouse pad for a laptop, or different accessories. So this is when you're in the care stage, right? And you as a marketeer, then if we go on the other side, as a marketeer, you would want to use different targeting mechanisms to target users in those different stages, right? So yeah, I hope this explained to you. If you have an additional questions, just feel free to, again, write it down in the comment box. Can you explain influence consideration? Yes, so influence consideration, what that actually stands for is that we're trying to influence customers when they're, comparing between different products. Again, if I give an example of a laptop, let's say that they're comparing prices, or they're comparing the laptop memory or the CPU or something like that. So what we're trying to do in the influence consideration stage is really, influence their decision on the product that, we want them to buy. That's why it's called influence consideration. Any other question should be, okay. Can you define and identify your target audiences according to the search terms that they put on the search bar, either brand keywords or generic keywords? That's a long question. Can you define and identify your target audiences according to the search terms that they put? Oh, good question. So there's no solution for that. So yeah, currently there's no solution in AdWords that could help you figure out who the audience is based on the search terms. But yeah, it's a really good question. Any tips on how to differentiate when you are in B2B marketing rather than B2C? Really good question. All right, so the B2B versus B2C. What I would say is, just because you're focused on a B2B clients, keep in mind that, the people that actually work for those, B2B customers, they're no different than, that the folks of, the B2C people. So they still have their own interests, they have their own passions, they're still, they still do their own things, right? So even when you're in a B2B segment, I think it's like super important to understand what the interests and intents are of the people in the B2B segment. Now, I know that there are some, specifics in terms of, decision making inside the company. There are some specifics in terms of, who's paying for that product inside the company. But again, keep in mind that the user, which is essentially using a smartphone or desktop or tablet or whatever that is a person, right? So what I often say is that B2B marketing is essentially, that we should not differentiate between B2B marketing and B2C, but it's essentially business to human marketing, where we have a person in the back that has their own interests and intents. Let's see if we have any other questions. Will RSA ads work if I decrease my max CPC compared to regular search network campaigns? Will RLSA ads work? Yes, definitely. So if you decrease your max CPC, RLSA will work unless the bid is not competitive enough to for a RLSA user to enter the auction. Do we have any other questions? No, I think that's it. All right, guys. So thanks so much for joining us during this Discover Hangout on Air series. I hope you enjoyed it. If you still have any questions, we're going to have another Hangout on Air session on measurement and attribution. So please join us in the next session as well. And yeah, hope you're having a nice day, and I'll see you in the next Hangout.